Mom, I've missed you so much.
As I was dispatched to a grand mansion as a housekeeper, a familiar voice came from behind me. When I turned around, there stood an 8-year-old boy. Wait, are you? 3 years ago, my husband and son were swept away by a river and passed away. And now, a boy who looks just like my boy stood right in front of me.
How dare you say that to my housekeeper?
The owner of the house quickly shot down the boy's words. Something strange caught my attention, and although his face was different, his voice sounded exactly like my late husband's. With questions weighing on my mind, I began working as a housekeeper there. Little did I know that such a shocking truth was hidden away. I used to work freelance in IT, living in New York City with my husband and son. When we got married, we bought a house in my husband's name, Ken, on a 30-year mortgage. It was a big decision for me at 24 and Ken at 26. Balancing work and chores is tough, but I've got to give it my best. Since then, we both worked hard, but we were happy. However, around the time our son Ryan started kindergarten, Ken's nightlife started to become more frequent. He even began dipping into the savings we'd set aside for living expenses and Ryan's education. Worried that our family might fall apart and concerned for Ryan's future, I decided to have a serious talk with Ken. Ken, could you please be a bit more careful with your spending? At least try to stick to your personal funds when you go out.
I earned that money in the first place, so I should be free to use it how I want. Spending on the kid doesn't do us any favors.
I can't believe it. You only ever think about yourself. You dump all the housework and childcare on me too.
Fine, I'll apologize, okay? Sorry. Geez, this is annoying.
After that, he stormed out of the house. He's probably off to a pub again. He hasn't learned a thing. Even though I tried to set him straight, his partying didn't stop, and our marriage only worsened. Eventually, we barely talked, and before I knew it, Ken was coming home late nearly every night.
Daddy, he's never home, is he?
Ryan looked so sad, missing out on time with his dad. I was just about to reach my breaking point. But then, something unexpected happened.
How about we go camping this weekend? Just the three of us. I found a popular spot, and I've already planned everything out.
I was caught off guard by his sudden suggestion. Well, sure, but what brought this on all of a sudden?
I know I've been a burden to you lately, and as a sort of apology, I thought it'd be nice for us to go out together and strengthen our bond as a family.
He glanced at me with a bit of a sheepish smile. Thank you, Ken. I felt tears welling up, touched that my husband was thinking of our family.
Hey Ryan, there's a river nearby, so how about you and I go fishing together?
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I want to catch a big one and surprise Mom.
Seeing my son so excited made me feel truly happy. And then came the day of the camping trip. We arrived at the spot around 4 p.m. But even though Ken had said it was a popular location, there wasn't another person in sight. Rather than a campsite, it was closer to the middle of the mountain forest. Is this place really popular? It doesn't look that way.
It's a hidden gem, only known to a few. At night, you can see a sky full of stars. Just wait, you'll love it.
As a camping newbie, I was honestly pretty anxious. But since Ken put in the effort to find this place, I should trust him. With that thought, I decided to enjoy the time with my family. I borrowed a tent from a friend and was about to set it up when Ken started working on something else.
According to what I read online, This time is perfect for catching fish. So Ryan and I are heading to the best fishing spot now.
I kind of wanted you to help me with the tent, Ken.
I just really want Ryan to catch a lot of fish. You don't mind, right?
When I glanced at Ryan, he was already practicing casting his rod with enthusiasm. Seeing how excited he was about his first fishing experience, I wanted him to have a great memory. If that's the case, go ahead. I'll handle the tent and get dinner ready.
Thanks. We should be back in about an hour, so don't worry.
Got it. But the river can be dangerous, so please don't take your eyes off Ryan, okay?
No problem. You can count on me.
With that, I waved goodbye as my husband and son headed upstream. All right, let's do this. I tried to stay positive, but with no camping experience, I struggled to set up the tent. After that, without a break, I started preparing Ryan's favorite barbecue. Gosh, it's already so late. The clock showed 7 p.m., and it was pitch dark around me. That was when I first realized that Ken and Ryan were taking longer than expected to return. I tried to call them, but my phone had no signal. With a lantern in hand, I went upstream to search for them. But they were nowhere to be found, and only their fishing gear lay abandoned near the river. Could something have happened? However, this wasn't a managed campsite, and my husband had the car keys with him. I walked desperately until I found a spot with cell reception and called for help. 2 hours later. No, this can't be happening. All that was found downstream were the shoes my husband and son had been wearing. According to the locals, the river's current was swift that day, and they believed there was little hope. And 3 days after they went missing, the search was called off. Ken, Ryan, why? I was devastated, drowning in grief. Memories of when I first met my husband, the joy we shared when we found out I was pregnant, and the first time Ryan said, "Mom." The moments we lived together as a family played like a montage in my mind, squeezing my heart. But life went on, harsh and unyielding. What? $50,000? Without my knowledge, Ken had racked up a huge debt. There was no way I could pay it off with just my salary, and I felt a chill run through my body as I held the demand notice in my hands. If I renounced my inheritance, the debt would disappear, but that would mean giving up the house filled with our family memories since it was in Ken's name. I absolutely can't do that. I'll find a way to keep our home. So I took on additional work as a housekeeper, along with my freelance job. While I registered under my real name with the agency, I was allowed to use the alias Mia Turner when working with clients. If I were called by my first name, Samantha, it would remind me of how Ken used to call me, and I feared it would make me too emotional to focus on my job. Back then, I was that fragile and hurt. So I decided that if I was going to change my first name, I might as well use a completely different last name too. Looking back, I think I made quite a request of the agency. But my supervisor didn't even flinch, and she just gave me a gentle smile.
That's okay. If you ever need to talk, just let us know.
If he had been dismissive back then, I don't know where I'd be today. Because of his kindness, I worked hard to show my appreciation. And as luck would have it, I landed a major contract in my IT work, allowing me to pay off the entire debt within about 2 years. With a growing interest in housekeeping, I continued balancing both jobs. 3 years after losing my husband and son in the river accident on a particular day, I was sent to a grand estate by my agency. The client is Ted Anderson. There's also an 8-year-old boy named Ben. If Ryan were alive, they'd be the same age. The lady of the house had passed away a month before I was assigned due to a chronic illness. There had been a previous housekeeper, but they suddenly resigned, so I was sent in as a replacement. Nice to meet you. I'm Mia Turner, and I'll be helping out starting today.
Thank you, and welcome.
Well, yes. I was so startled it felt like my heart might jump out of my chest. The reason? The owner of the house had a voice that sounded exactly like my husband Ken's, even though his face was different. Strangely, he also seemed uneasy, avoiding direct eye contact with me.
Well, so, you're Mia Turner, right?
He double-checked my profile and looked somewhat relieved. Is there something that's bothering you?
Oh no, it's nothing. I must have been mistaken.
As he muttered this, his son, Ben, walked into the room.
Mom? It's really you, isn't it?
As soon as he saw my face, his eyes lit up. Are you Ryan? The last time I saw my son, he was just 5 years old. This boy was taller and looked more grown up, but he resembled Ryan so much it was uncanny.
I've missed you.
He started to walk toward me, and I found myself taking a step forward as well. But just then, Ted stepped between us.
This woman is not who you think she is. It's rude to behave like that suddenly.
I'm sorry.
Ben's excitement faded instantly, and he retreated back to his room.
I'm sorry about that. Ever since my wife passed away, he tends to react like that whenever he sees women around his mother's age.
I see. I had held a faint hope that this boy might be Ryan, so his words left me feeling disappointed. His name is different, and it's probably just my imagination. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding born of my loneliness, and from that day, I began living in the Anderson home as a live-in housekeeper. As I continued my work, I gradually realized from conversations between Ted and Ben that the late lady of the house wasn't biologically related to Ben. But they never wanted to discuss the woman who had passed away. Moreover, I noticed that Ben wasn't attending school, and he didn't seem to fully understand why he was in that situation. Still, company policy forbade me from asking personal questions, so despite my curiosity, I focused on my duties. However, one thing troubled me. Ben wouldn't warm up to me at all. He kept his distance, and sometimes he'd even leave the room when I was around. It seems like he really doesn't like me. Since he reminded me so much of my own son, his coldness stung even more, as if it were my own child shutting me out. Still, I tried not to dwell on it too much, telling myself, I'm here for work after all. About a month after I started working as a housekeeper there, something unbelievable happened. That day, I was cleaning the house as usual. Then, Ben glared at me with a furious expression. What's wrong? I was shaken, but I tried not to show it and quietly looked at him. Then, all of a sudden, Ben rushed toward me.
It's been so hard.
The 8-year-old boy clung to me, sobbing uncontrollably. After that, he revealed something to me, and his unexpected confession brought tears to my own eyes. I hugged the boy tightly. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay now. As Ben cried loudly, I gently patted his back. Then he wiped away his tears and said, Here, handing me something. This, could it be? I understand. Leave the rest to me. After that, I uncovered the hidden truth that had been kept from me all this time. As my suspicions deepened, I decided to investigate while continuing my work as a housekeeper. And not long after, I discovered a shocking past. As anger welled up inside me, I wondered what those 3 years had really been about. I won't forgive them. I'll solve this myself, no matter what. I was determined to get revenge on the person who had driven me to the depths of despair. And then, on the day when everything was finally prepared, I decided to send Ben to stay with a friend of mine to keep him away from the coming confrontation. After finishing dinner, I sat down on a chair. It's almost time for him to come home. I quietly waited for Ted to return. Then I heard the sound of the front door opening. "Oh, welcome back. Dinner's ready, you know." Normally, I'd be dressed in the company-issued polo shirt and apron, greeting him with a welcome home. But that day, I was in my pajamas, munching on some chips while watching TV.
What is with that outfit? And how dare you speak to house owner like that? It's completely disrespectful.
Noticing something was off, Ted pointed at my clothes and raised his voice. But I stared back at him without flinching. This is perfectly normal. After all, I'm your wife. His eyes widened in shock.
What are you saying all of a sudden? You're supposed to be Mia Turner.
That's just the name I use for work. My real name is Samantha, and you're Ken, aren't you?
No, I'm Ted Anderson.
Don't bother playing dumb. I know everything now. I threw down his passport, health insurance card, and the medical records from when he had plastic surgery. The fact that you kept these hidden proves that you're my husband. You see, on the day I hugged the boy, I had been cleaning while humming a song I made up. I never thought that would lead to this. Singing my own songs while doing chores was a habit from when the 3 of us lived together. I always sang the same silly song, and eventually my son picked it up and would say, "I love Mom's funny song." That's how Ben recognized me as his mother, because he heard me humming a familiar tune that day.
How did you find the passport and the medical records? They were hidden in the back of the storage room.
Ryan told me where to look.
When did he figure out where the valuables were hidden?
According to my son, since I wasn't allowed to go outside, I had a lot of free time, so I spent it observing Dad. Because of that, he said he knew roughly where everything important was hidden. But there was something even more surprising. Ken, you faked your and Ryan's deaths by making it look like you drowned in the river so you could start a new life. According to my son, on the day we went camping as a family, Ken took Ryan to a secluded spot. Ryan sensed something was wrong and said, "I want to go back to Mom," but Ken held onto his arm and led him toward the faster currents of the river. That's when they encountered a woman. Apparently, she owned a nearby vacation home and happened to be walking along the riverbank. After talking with her for a while, Ken suddenly threw both his and Ryan's sandals into the river. And before Ryan knew it, he was living with that woman. Ryan was confused, but Ken told him, "Your mom is a bad person who tried to end our lives." The fishing trip was just an excuse to escape. Eventually, Ken forced Ryan to accept, saying, "This woman is your new mom now." At the time, everyone believed you both had died when your sandals were found downstream. But it turns out, you staged the whole thing. Was it to keep me from finding out where you were? According to my son, they took on the woman's last name, changed their first names, and moved into her home. Ryan strongly believed, there's no way Mom could be the bad one. But as a 5-year-old, he also felt he couldn't oppose his dad if he wanted to survive. Do you have any idea how scared he was every day? Of course, someone like you, who only thinks of himself, couldn't possibly understand. When I said this, Ken turned his head away. You probably kept Ryan from going to school so that his identity wouldn't be discovered. But because of that, he spent 3 lonely years. My son had no friends and had to play alone around the house. And he told me that he found a small outbuilding on the woman's estate where he created a secret base and often played. The outbuilding had a padlocked door, barred windows. The building had electricity, along with air conditioning and a toilet. Inside the roughly 100 square foot room, it was packed with books, and Ryan spent his days reading to distract himself from the loneliness. Looking back, my son kept his distance from me from the moment I started working at the Anderson home. Later, when I asked him why, he explained, "The housekeeper looked exactly like my mom, but if I asked and it turned out she wasn't, I'd be devastated by the disappointment." So he purposely kept his distance while carefully observing me. Even so, for an 8-year-old to think that deeply, it must have been all those books he read in the outbuilding that gave him a level of insight beyond his years. He would need to catch up on school subjects, but I remember feeling relief, thinking he'd quickly adapt and make friends. And fortunately, the woman who owned the home was wealthy, so Ben was able to live comfortably. She was always kind to my son, and they had many long conversations. Still, he was just 5 at the time, at an age when he wanted to play with friends. Thinking about how he was suddenly confined to a stranger's home, I couldn't help but feel a deep sadness for him. I need to push Ken further, for Ryan's sake too. I clenched my fists and reignited my determination. "Ken, you used her sympathy to get close to that woman."
Oh, come on. Where's your proof?
"Actually, she left behind a diary, and it says right here that you told her all of that." I pulled out a thick diary. It was a record of the woman's daily life, including detailed entries from the day my husband and son went missing by the river.
Where did you find that? I had no idea it existed.
Well, take a guess. She had apparently started writing in her diary while sitting beside my son as he read in the outbuilding. Ryan had told me that she kept the diary on a bookshelf in that room. My son said that although Ken knew about the outbuilding, he never visited it, either because he wasn't interested or for some other reason. As a result, he didn't know that she was writing her diary there. She lost her child in an accident, and she herself had a terminal illness with only 3 years left to live. She wrote that she wished she could live with her child one more time. According to the diary, she was shocked when she met Ryan and Ken during her walk by the river, because Ryan looked exactly like her late child. Without thinking, she shared her story with Ken. Then Ken allegedly told her, "I got divorced from my wife, but my son needs a mother. Would you consider becoming his mom?" Ken lied, claiming, "We separated because my wife was abusive," and tearfully pleaded, "Someone as kind as you would make him so happy." The woman felt sympathy for both Ken and Ryan. She also developed a desire to live with Ryan, who reminded her so much of her lost child. In her diary, she wrote about how she welcomed Ken and Ryan into her home, calling it her last gift in life. However, she felt too grateful just to have them with her, so she couldn't bring herself to discuss legal matters like adoption, as revealed in her diary. And since Ken never mentioned anything about that either, they started their life together without formal ties. The diary also mentioned that she found it strange that Ryan wasn't attending school. But Ken explained, "My son is sick to attend school, but I haven't told him that." Hearing this, she didn't question it any further. But look at this part of the diary. It says, "Ted might be lying, doesn't it?" Ken stared at the passage intently. As she spent more time talking to Ryan, she began to think that his real mother couldn't possibly be as terrible as Ken claimed. She thought so because Ryan always looked so happy when he talked about me. According to the diary, Ken persuaded her to deposit large sums of money into his account under the pretense of living expenses. Although she thought it was a bit much, She saw Ryan as a reflection of her deceased child. Believing that it would allow Ryan to live a happier life, she agreed to send the money. However, she grew suspicious of how often Ken inquired about her finances.
I think he might be after my wealth.
She started brushing off Ken's questions about her assets, suspecting his intentions. But the diary alone wasn't enough to serve as solid evidence. So I searched every corner of the house. I even followed him when he went out, tracking where he went. It turned out that at his favorite bar, he would often shout, "I got plastic surgery to bury my past, and I'm going to take all of that woman's money." The bartender was the one who told me this. And in Ken's room, I found numerous credit card statements, evidence of his extravagant spending. Now I'm absolutely certain. You lied for money and got close to that woman who owned this mansion. I threw the papers showing his record of extravagant purchases directly at Ken. How dare you ruin my life and Ryan's?
Well, if I'd stayed with you, I'd have lived a boring life. I always wanted to escape that poor, miserable life.
What was the whole camping trip about then? Let's bond as a family. What a joke. I cried out in frustration, but Ken just snorted and gave me a smug smile.
Didn't you get it? That was all just to wipe out my debt in one go.
What do you mean by that? Explain yourself properly.
I was planning to make it look like our son drowned in an accident and collect the insurance money.
Wait, are you saying you plan to take Ryan's life? He was so happy, thinking you were spending time with him. I can't believe this. I was furious at how heartlessly he had trampled on our son's feelings. But Ken suddenly started grinning slyly.
Well, I guess there really is a God, huh? Letting me meet that rich woman.
On the way to the campsite, Ken had noticed a large, impressive mansion. Later, when he took Ryan upstream, he met a well-dressed woman who looked wealthy, and he quickly realized she was the owner of the grand house. So, on the spot, Ken decided to exploit the fact that Ryan resembled her late child. He shifted his plan to latch onto the woman and take advantage of her wealth. If you wanted that glamorous life with her so badly, you should have just left me.
Don't be stupid. If I divorced you, you might have gotten custody. And without Ryan, she would have never let me into her house.
Did you fake the drowning to cut ties with me without going through a divorce?
Of course, why else would I do it?
Do you have any idea how much pain I went through after suddenly losing my family?
I don't care about your feelings, Samantha.
He said this without a hint of remorse, and on top of that, he seemed only concerned about money, muttering, "If things keep going like this, her estate will end up going to the state. What am I supposed to do?" I was stunned by his callousness, but pulled out an envelope. This is her handwritten will, and it includes her wishes regarding her estate.
Let me see that. Wait, what? It says all her assets go to Ben. And where did you even find this document?
It was in a safety deposit box she had. Knowing her time was limited, the woman's only lingering concern was for Ryan. She secretly handed Ryan the key to the safe, telling him, "Use my inheritance to find your mom." The safe contained her assets and her will. Of course, the diary mentioned that since a child couldn't manage everything alone, she intended to discuss it with her lawyer. However, her condition suddenly worsened and she passed away. So while Ryan had the key, he couldn't do anything with it. But on the day he realized I was his mom, Ryan came to me and handed me the key to the safe, seeking my help.
Why is he the only one who gets to inherit? I lived with her too.
Maybe because you never showed her any care? It turns out Ryan took it upon himself to care for the woman, and the will included a note expressing her gratitude toward him. In contrast, my husband neglected Ryan, never worked, and spent his time playing around, which greatly displeased the woman. According to the note attached to the will, she felt she'd already given Ken plenty of money for living expenses and saw no need to leave him any more of her assets. By the way, you're hiding something, aren't you?
What are you talking about?
Ken laughed nervously, as if he had something to hide. But when I pulled out a certain document, his face went pale. This is an analysis of the pills you claimed were supplements to improve her health that you made her take. It turns out that after she started taking them, her symptoms worsened significantly. At first, the woman took the pills as Ken recommended. But eventually, she began to feel extreme fatigue and pretended to take the pills while secretly keeping them in a drawer in the outbuilding to analyze later. All of this was detailed in her diary. However, the pills remained where she had hidden them, and the diary didn't include any information about what she discovered. She must have passed away before she could investigate it. So, I took it upon myself to analyze the supplement ingredients on her behalf. It turned out that while the pills were easy to acquire, they contained substances that could worsen her condition. When I checked Ken's computer, I found plenty of search history for terms like drugs, illness, side effects. I handed Ken the search history and an order form for the same kind of pills that the woman had been taking. The purchase details were attached to an email sent to him.
Well, looks like I'm busted. You figured everything out, huh?
This proves that you deliberately shortened her life. It's not too late. Turn yourself in.
Hey, don't get so worked up. Just hear me out.
Strangely, Ken seemed unusually calm.
If Ryan inherits the estate, that means we, as his parents, would manage the money, right? Keep quiet about this, and I'll give you half of the woman's fortune. How about it? Not a bad deal, right?
Ken casually wrapped an arm around my shoulder. No way. How can you even suggest that after taking someone's life? I pushed him away with all my strength.
You're such a stubborn fool. She was on her way out anyway, even if I'd done nothing. So why are you making such a big deal out of this?
Ken shouted angrily, trying to intimidate me. I thought you might show some remorse, but you're beyond help. I have no sympathy left for you.
Say that again.
I recorded our entire conversation. I'm going to hand this over to the police.
Hey, give that to me.
Ken lunged at me, trying to snatch the voice recorder. Sensing the danger, I bolted from the house and ran as fast as I could toward the outbuilding on the mansion's grounds. But before I could even close the door, Ken caught up and forced his way inside.
I know you're in here. There's no escape now.
He blocked the door, trapping me inside. The room was small, with barely any place to hide other than the bathroom, and I found myself in a desperate situation. But just then, the door slammed shut with a loud bang.
What? How?
Ken was locked inside with a padlock from the outside, unable to leave. The one who's trapped is you, Ken.
Samantha, did you do this?
As it turned out, there was a hidden passage beneath the floor of the outbuilding that led outside, and I had already used it to escape. I had also locked the exit from the hidden passage, so even if Ken found it, he wouldn't be able to get out. I never thought this passage would come in handy like this. Ryan had shown me the underground tunnel when he used the outbuilding as his secret base.
Damn it, you tricked me. Let me out of here, you bitch.
Ken's enraged face appeared through the small barred window. You seem pretty confident for someone about to be arrested by the police.
No, wait. How about this? I'll give you 3/4. No, all of the money. Just don't turn me in, okay?
Realizing the seriousness of his situation, Ken suddenly switched to a pleading tone. I refuse it. Why should I help the man who abandoned me?
I'll apologize for that. Please, just let this slide. Otherwise, my life is over.
Ken broke down, sobbing and sniffling. You're acting like the victim here, but you're not. With modern medicine, that woman could have lived a little longer.
But I don't want to end up behind bars. I'm really sorry.
Enough. Ryan was left all alone for 3 years because of you. Sorry just isn't going to cut it anymore. I couldn't stand his selfishness any longer, and I shouted from the depths of my anger. And I've been fighting through the grief of losing my family too. You need to truly reflect on what you've done.
This isn't how it was supposed to go. Damn it.
I think he collapsed on the spot, because I could no longer see him through the window. After that, I called the police. Ken was dragged out of the outbuilding and taken away. Later, he was questioned by the authorities, and he admitted to everything I had uncovered, including the matter of the pills he had given the woman. Though the trial is still pending, it's unlikely he'll be released anytime soon. I filed for divorce and demanded $30,000 in compensation and $60,000 in child support for Ryan. The total amount was immediately paid out of his savings, leaving Ken's account empty. Since he had quit his job, he would likely face a harsh life even if he got out. Out of respect for the woman's wishes, Ryan inherited her estate. But aside from purchasing a small altar to honor her memory, he donated the entire amount to a children's home. After that, Ryan and I moved to a new place. Ryan has made his new friends, and I continue to work in IT while also taking on housekeeping jobs. Together, my son and I are committed to building a brighter future.